Okay. Good afternoon. Actually, before we begin, can everyone just make sure they're muted? Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
It might be the phone, the calling.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, thank you. So, good morning and welcome to our Queensborough President Land Use Public Hearing. This hearing is taking place both in person in the Borough President's Conference Room and on our YouTube channel at Queens BP. I am Vicki Garvey. I am the Land Use Director for Queensborough President Donovan Richards, and I will be chairing this hearing on his behalf. For those who wish to testify virtually and haven't already pre-registered to do so, please visit our website at queensbp.nyc.gov. Written testimony is also welcome from those who are unable to testify in real time. All written testimony must be received by 5 p.m. today and may be submitted to email by planning2, that's the number 2, at queensbp.nyc.gov, or conventional mail sent to the office of the Queensborough President at 120-55 Queens Boulevard, room 226, Kew Gardens, New York, 11424. Lisa, can you please review how this public hearing will proceed?
Yes, the public hearing shall be conducted in the following manner. The applicant will give a description of the requested zoning action, the proposed project, and respond to any questions from the chair. The floor will then be opened for public speakers. Please listen for your name to be called. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to ask questions and/or deliver testimony. When you are called, please identify yourself for the record, and if you are formally speaking as a representative or member of a group. The calendar item number or application you are speaking about, and whether you are for or against the item. Then you may begin your testimony. Please note that a signal will ring when your time is up. At the discretion of the chair, if there are a large number of speakers on any particular item, it may be put on second call. Speakers for and against that item may also be called to testify on an alternating basis. Please note, if you are testifying virtually, you must keep your camera on during your testimony and display your name accurately on Zoom. Thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you, Lisa. The chair reserves the right to ask speakers for clarifications or further information regarding the applications or comments made in response to the applications. Lisa, can you please call the first calendar item?
Yes, calendar item number 1, ULURP number 260089, PCQ. The applicant, New York City Department of Citywide Administrative Services and the Department of Parks and Recreation. Affected Community Board number 2. Applicant, please begin.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Julia Dowling. I'm a project planner at New York City Parks. And today I'm joined by Colleen Alderson, who is the Chief of Planning and Real Estate of Parklands and Real Estate Services. And today I'm just going to go through our application for the Queens 2 Walk to a Park ULURP. So allow me a minute to just go and share my screen. Okay. All right, can everyone see my slides? Okay, great.
Yes.
Awesome. So this is ULURP number, sorry, I just need to move my cursor. Okay. So sorry, this is ULURP number C260089 PCQ. And today is the Queensborough President Land Use Public Hearing. So this is just an overview of our project. So this is a continuation of the Parks Department's Walk to a Park initiative. And the applications for this ULURP are the New York City Department of Parks and the Department of Citywide Services. The actions that we're seeking for this ULURP are acquisition and site selection of privately owned properties. And the goal of this project is to increase the likelihood and potential to serve underserved neighborhoods, specifically residents that are living in a walk to a park gap. And walk to a park gaps, as we're going to be mentioning throughout this presentation, are these red areas on the map here. And they show areas where residents don't live in a quick walk to a park. And by our metrics, that's between a 5 to 10 minute walk to a park. And for this initiative, which started under the de Blasio administration, the Walk to Park initiative started under the de Blasio administration. And the goal is to get 85% of New Yorkers in a walking distance to a park. Currently we're at 84.2%. So we're almost there, but that 0.8% still represents about 63,000 New Yorkers that don't live within an easy walk to a park. So for this neighborhood ULURP initiative, we've targeted several community board districts throughout the city that we've deemed are underserved. And for Queens, there's a number of districts shown in orange on this map. So districts 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, and 12 are a part of this initiative. And I'll mention also that Queens Community District 3 has already gone through this process and has an approved walk to a park neighborhood ULURP. That was approved in December of last year. And the community district that we're speaking about today is Community District 2, which includes the neighborhoods of Sunnyside, Woodside, and Long Island City. So this is just a testament to how important green infrastructure and open space is in the city. We consider it to be essential infrastructure, and from a public health perspective, important for public health and for recreation, and social, and being social. So that's important and part of why we're trying to find new areas of parks in the city. And in order to try to find new parks in the city, new parks and open spaces, we have several different ways that we've gone about trying to get new open spaces. So, and we've had to be creative because there are not that many vacant or underused sites in New York City. So one of the ways we go about getting new open spaces is through partnerships with other agencies. So for instance, we have the Schoolyards to Playgrounds program, where the Parks Department will reconstruct playgrounds on Department of Education property. And after a new playground is reconstructed, that playground is open to the public during non-school hours. And also we work with NYCHA to reconstruct some of their open space properties as well. And this is just a quick overview of our typical ULURP process. So typically it can take up to 2 to 3 years to get to the acquisition process. This is because for any private property, New York City Parks needs to go through the ULURP process, which can take up to 8 months. And the ULURP process just gives New York City Parks the authority to acquire the site. And this is needed to just start negotiation offers. So that means that for any potential site, even if we're not sure that we're able to purchase the site, we still have to go through this ULURP process, and it can really delay our ability to negotiate with real estate owners. And we often will miss out on properties because private entities are better able to and more quickly able to negotiate with real estate owners. So this process is a different approach. In this process, we're hoping to get acquisition authority in advance of knowing of a willing seller. So we've identified many properties, and we're looking to get acquisition of authority approval in advance, and then hope that there's a willing seller eventually. And then if there is a willing seller, and we're only going to be working with willing sellers in this process, if there is a willing seller, we will then be able to quickly enter into real estate negotiations without waiting again for a long Mueller process. And like I explained before, this is the Walk to a Park program. There are still several gaps in the area that we're looking to close as part of this program. And you can see that there's a number of gaps all throughout Queens here. So just quickly, this is a profile of Queens Community Board 2. Some of these statistics on your screen are reasons that have contributed to why this district was selected as part of this process. So you can see that there's a low open space ratio, which means that the number of park or open space acres per 1,000 residents is quite low relative to the citywide average. Poverty rates was also a contributing factor. That also helped us determine why we selected the 19 districts that we did. And just moving forward, so quickly about our methodology. So the way that we went about this process is by trying to find sites that fit certain criteria. So we have two different buckets of sites, if you will. So the first bucket is primary sites, and all of the primary sites are vacant. They need to be at least 5,000 square feet or larger. And there needs to be no no pulled permits for development or ongoing construction. And as well, they need to be suitable for park development. And there's also the secondary criteria sites. So these sites they have similar requirements to the primary sites. However, the secondary sites, the main difference is that they're not vacant. So some of them will have transportation utilities, public facilities, things like that. However, any development that's on any of the secondary sites must be built to 50% or less of the maximum allowable FAR, which means that all of the sites which means that all the secondary sites are underbuilt relative to what their zoning allows. And also, secondary sites must serve a walk to a park gap area, which means that the site itself does not need to be in one of those red gap areas, but it needs to be close enough to the gap areas so that it serves people that are living in the gap area. And then one other point about this application, it includes a sunset clause, which means that once the ULURP is approved, the acquisition authority does expire after 10 years. So that means that the Parks Department has 10 years to act on acquiring a property. And once the 10 years is up, that doesn't prohibit the Parks Department from trying to acquire a certain property. It just means that we would need to go through the ULURP process again. And once we acquire sites, we just have some ideas about what could exist on future sites. So the types of amenities that can exist on future sites depends on the size of the site. So we have a few ideas here for the types of amenities that suit different site sizes. And I'll just mention that these are not, they're not prescriptive. They're just ideas. These images doesn't mean that this is exactly what a future park is going to look like. And I'll also mention that for any site that becomes built out as a result of this process, the Parks Department plans to engage in our typical public outreach process, which means that the public will have the chance to give input and potentially shape the amenities and the park that gets built out. And just a snapshot of the sites that were included in this application. So we include 7 primary sites, so 7 of those vacant sites, and then we have 30 secondary sites, so 30 underbuilt sites that are in walk to a park, that serve walk to a park gap areas. And just as a reminder, this project is an initiative to get the acquisition authority for all of these sites. In the event that any of these sites has a willing seller eventually, the Parks Department does not plan to acquire all of these sites. We're only going to be interested in acquiring sites that have a willing seller. And these are where our primary sites are located. There's some are clustered around Long Island City, and others are more in the western portion of the community district. And here are our 30 secondary sites, which have clusters across the district. And following this hearing, the ULURP is going to go to the City Planning Commission and then City Council. And afterwards, we'll follow the typical community outreach process for potentially building out a site. And then next, I'm just going to quickly run through some example properties. So we've selected about 7 of our 37 sites to just quickly run through to give everyone an idea of what kinds of properties we're looking at. And this is just a preview of the kinds of things that the kinds of sites we're looking at. But if you are interested in seeing our whole list of sites, you can go to the ZAP portal. That's the zoning application portal. And if you look up the ULURP number associated with this ULURP, you can see the full list of all of the primary and secondary sites. So this here is is Queens Block 1336, lot 28. You can see that it's relatively flat. It's a grassy area. It's vacant. There's no use on the site currently. And then just another reminder of where our secondary sites are. So we're going to show site 4. So this, you can see on this map where site 4 is located towards the Sunnyside Rail Yard. And this is an example of an underbuilt site. So this is a site that's not built to the full, it's built to 50% or less of the zoning allowable area. And yeah, this is an example of a secondary site. And this is another example of a secondary site in a different portion of the district. And this again is a secondary site that's underbuilt. And this one as well. This was on Queens Boulevard. And this is a recently closed gas station. And I'll just also mention that Parks has very high standards for cleanup. And all sites would be built out to Parks's high standards for safety. So that is all that I have for this presentation. Are we opening this up to questions now, or does that wait till the end?
We're gonna go per application, and I'll ask a few questions. So thank you, Julia. That was very comprehensive. So my first question is, can you just give an overview of CB2's discussion with these primary and secondary sites? I know they had a lot of feedback. Just wanted to hear you summarize it.
Yeah, definitely. So overall, I would say that the board was very enthusiastic as a whole. And they were really, really interested in engagement. So Colleen and I went to the community board multiple times during the community board portion of the ULURP. And we really did try to be receptive to some of their feedback. So some of the feedback that we heard was that there weren't enough sites in that northwestern portion of the community district. So we actually, so when we presented originally in September, we didn't have a lot of sites in that northwestern portion. And so that's when we actually went back to looking at sites. And that's when we actually expanded one of our criteria. So for secondary criteria, like one of the things that I mentioned was that those sites need to serve a walk to a park gap. This, as it exists in its current form, is an expanded version of the previous criterion. The previous criterion was that the site needed to be within a walk to a park gap area. So we actually expanded this criterion so that it would give us more opportunities for more sites, which allowed us to be responsive to what the board was asking for in terms of adding more sites in certain areas.
Okay, understood. So they were looking to increase the amount of sites potentially with the application. So with some of the, well, I guess with both primary and secondary sites, some of the photos you showed of the sites have, auto uses, or things that might require, I would say, heavier cleanup. What is the protocol for site cleanup? I guess at the point where you acquire the land, but before you develop it into a park.
Yeah, so before we acquire any parcel, we're required to do what's called a phase one analysis, which has, which where we get information about previous uses of the like historical uses of that area. So that off the bat just gives us a good sense for the types of cleanup that the site will require. And I'll also just say that it's definitely not unheard of for parks to acquire sites that would involve very serious cleanup. And because our parks are used by young children and families every day, we have very high safety standards for the level of cleanup that's required. So yeah, we would do the phase one analysis, and then we would just need to carry out, we work with DEP to make sure that sites have limited hazardous potential.
Got it. Okay. And then I guess, a question that came to me was with the recent Long Island City rezoning, I am also noticing that most of that rezoning area is in the northwest part of the district. And so my question is, did that rezoning have an impact on the sites that you would have chosen otherwise as well?
I'm actually not sure. I think that I imagine, I'm not sure of the exact timing of things, but I imagine that as a result of the rezoning, like certain developments were began as a result of the rezoning. So and one of the things that we look for is whether or not permits were pulled, or permits are with the Department of Buildings. So I imagine that if there was a new development that was taking place as a result of the rezoning, that may have that would have eliminated like those properties.
Okay, understood. So now we will open it up to public testimony. I just want to ask if anyone in the room would like to. Okay, sir, I'm going to give you the mic. If you could please state your name for the record before you deliver any testimony or questions.
My name is Larry Brown. I'm the owner of the property at 46-49 53rd Avenue. I just want to be clear one thing. You say you're only going to people who are willing to buy the property?
So there's many sites that we're including in this application. And when I talk about going to people that are willing to sell, that's really that's concerned with like what happens after the CLERP application. So once the application is approved, we're only really going to enter real estate negotiations with people that are willing to sell.
But I'm not willing to sell. Can we just take me off the list right now?
So we're interested in keeping as many sites as possible on the application, just because even so we just want to make sure that in the event that a site changes owner or something changes in the next 10 years, we still have the ability to approve the site. And also I'll just bring in Colleen. Colleen, if you have anything to add to that question as well, just feel free.
Yeah, so as Jules said, we're only looking for willing sellers. I think our intention is to keep the sites included in the ULURP, and as you know, we'll continue to do outreach, and should the ULURP be approved. And again, there's a 10-year sunset, and we do recognize that plans change. Also, to be clear, if any site there is an action taken that brings it out of the criteria, like a permit pulled, we don't have the approval to acquire. So it removes it from meeting the criteria. We would not be allowed to acquire. So that is another factor involved.
Right,
But yeah.
So you show interest and you come back and you say you want to buy it. And I say I don't want to sell, but you still come out. So I just issue, get a permit to put a shed out on it. Then I'm in the clear.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that. I'm sorry.
As soon as I put a permit on the property, then you withdraw the app off the list, right?
It's not that you're taken off the list. It means that we are not allowed to acquire your property. So once any property owner pulls a permit
Right.
to make a change or something like that of their property, it puts it out of the criteria. So that is a factor. So we would not be allowed to even acquire your property. That's a factor. And just your note that
My
you're not
concern is-
interested. Yeah.
My concern is 5 years down the road, you guys decide you want to buy it. Do I have to worry about it? Well, next week.
Not if you're not interested in selling your property. That the main purpose of
You're not
this.
you're not going to get them any property to
No,
take it.
no.
We have to be a willing participant.
Exactly.
All right.
And I also should say that as per the first two ULURP applications last year, there's a commitment that we focus on the vacant sites first before we look and engage with owners of secondary sites. So the priority is to focus on the vacant sites and then turn to the secondary to see if there's interest there. So I'll just add that as another factor in terms of prioritizing the sites.
All right. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. I think we have one person on the Zoom who may just be watching the hearing, but I want to give an opportunity to see if they would like to speak.
Alex Trzaskowski.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not raise my hand. When I filled out the form to listen, I elected to not speak. I'm just listening in. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just a land use planner for DCAS, and I'm involved in the project that way. So I'm not sure why. I don't know if it raised my hand in Zoom, but that was
It's
unintentional.
okay. Don't worry. We just
Yeah.
are making sure we give everyone the opportunity to speak.
Okay.
That's an attendee. So no worries.
Thank you.
Okay. So Sola, anyone else on the list?
No one else.
Okay, great.
Can I just add for the record, I think I misspoke earlier about the sites that we added as a result of the engagement with the community board. The sites we added were in the northeastern portion, not the northwestern portion, just for the record.
I see. Okay. Great. Well, I think with that, no other questions. The application is closed. Or this item is closed. Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next item. Lisa, if you could please call the next two calendar items.
Calendar items number 2 and 3 are related items. ULURP number 260147ZMQ and ULURP number N260148ZRQ. The applicant is 108 Realty Group, Inc., affected community board number 4. Please begin your testimony, applicant.
Hi, good morning. My name is Frank St. Jacques. I'm with Ackerman LLP. We are land use counsel for this project. I'm joined by a representative for the applicant, Andrew Esposito. I'll give a brief presentation and then both of us will be available to answer questions. Just bear with me while I share my screen. Great. So as noted, this is a project that's within Queens Community District 4. Just a brief overview, this is an application seeking a zoning map and text amendments. The zoning map amendment seeks to establish R7X C24 zoning, and the text amendment would establish an MIH area over the rezoning area. These actions are intended to facilitate a new 13-story, 119-unit mixed-use development at 4703 108th Street in Corona. I'll note that we had our full board meeting with Community Board 4 on Tuesday evening. Board 4 did vote to disapprove the application by a vote of 25 to 9 of the 33 votes. Their vote was to disapprove with the condition that the building should contain 50% of the units at 50% AMI, so a sort of an increased level of affordable units. Just run through some of the neighborhood context. The site and rezoning area are on the east side of 108th Street between 47th Avenue and 48th Avenue. This whole area was zoned R6 in 1961, but in 1989, contextual and lower density zoning districts were established, including an R6B along 108th Street, where the project is located. This was part of the area-wide Elmhurst Corona rezoning in 1989. The site is shown here on the tax map. It's a single 20,000 square foot tax lot. It's improved with a one-story industrial building occupied by several auto repair uses, which are considered non-conforming as the within the R6B zoning. There's no commercial overlay, and these more industrial uses are not conforming given that R6B zoning. Land use in the area is varied, a mix of commercial and industrial, some vacant sites, and housing along 108th Street. Generally smaller multifamily walk-ups and 1 and 2 family homes on the mid-blocks. The Corona Golf Playground and the larger Flushing Meadows Park are just a block to the east. This is a transit-oriented site. It's about a half-mile south of the 7 train. There's 2 stations, 103rd Street and 111th Street. And there's bus service, including the Q23 and Q58. The Q23 along 108th Street and the Q58 along Corona Avenue, just to the west. The site is in rezoning area is shown in context here in this aerial view looking east. You can see some of that context we just described, sort of mixed uses along 108th Street, which is a wide street, including the auto repair uses at the proposed zoning area, some of the multifamily walk-up buildings. There's a 5-story and basement building immediately to the east of the site along 48th Avenue, and essentially a full block front along 47th Avenue of multifamily walk-up buildings. There's a clear need for new housing and particularly affordable housing in this area. We believe this rezoning presents an opportunity to meet that need. In Community District 4, 54% of residents are rent burdened. Community District 4 has the 6th highest rent burden population in New York City and the 2nd highest in Queens overall. It also has an aging housing stock, despite the 1989 rezoning, or potentially because of the 1989 rezoning, which essentially downzoned much of the area. There hasn't been much new housing development in Community District 4. We're here again seeking these two land use actions, changing the current R6B to R7X with a C24 overlay, and the zoning text amendment to establish an MIH area with MIH option 1. The left-hand side of the screen shows the current zoning map, again, just, R6B. The proposed rezoning would establish that R7X with a C24 overlay along the block front. There's a quick comparison on the two charts on the bottom of the screen, comparing the current R6B, which would allow up to 6 stories and a maximum total FAR of 2.4, to the proposed R7X, which would increase density to allow new housing and non-residential uses at the site, including commercial and community facility, at a max height of 145 feet and a total FAR of 6.0. Both zoning districts do require 50% parking for market rate units or standard units. However, with the R7X and within the MIH area, there would be no parking required for those MIH affordable income restricted units. So the proposed development that would be facilitated by these actions, again, is a 13-story mixed-use building. It does achieve that full 145 feet that would be available in the R7X envelope. About 119,000 square feet of total floor area to achieve that, roughly 6.0 FAR in the R7X. The bulk of the building, about 93,000 square feet, is residential, resulting in 119 total apartments. We're planning to have a community facility component as well as a commercial component. There would be 30 MIH units under MIH option 1. That's 25% of the residential floor area. The breakdown is just 1 and 2 bedrooms, about 76 one-bedrooms and 43 two-bedrooms. And then the corresponding MIH units are shown there, 19 affordable one-bedrooms and 11 affordable two-bedrooms. There would be a garage parking area with 45 garage spaces to meet the parking requirement for the standard or market rate units. Just a few illustrative renderings, moving clockwise from the upper left-hand corner, that's looking north. The right-hand side of the upper right-hand side of the screen is looking at the building from 108th. And then at the bottom of the screen on the left-hand side, looking south, and then a street view. The intention is really to activate this streetscape along 108th Street with new, again, more active non-residential uses. The illustrative MIH breakdown is shown here. Again, that's 30 units at 60, the weighted average of 60% AMI with a income band 10% at 40% AMI. So you've got 12 units at 40% AMI, 6 units at 60% AMI, and another 12 at 80% AMI. We believe this represents the range of incomes in Community District 4, whose area median income is somewhere between 50 and 60%. This provides an opportunity to create new housing in the area and have market rate housing subsidize the creation of affordable housing with the MIH program, capturing those very low income families at 40% AMI, and also providing opportunities for low-income families at up to 80% AMI. This is without city subsidy. And then the breakdown of those units across the income bands is on the bottom of the screen. That concludes our presentation. Happy to answer any questions. And as I noted, Andrew Esposito from the applicant side is here as well to answer additional questions.
Thank you, Frank. So let's see. You gave a very brief overview of the CB4 discussion, speaking about how they wanted to have more units at a deeper level of affordability. Were there any other comments or concerns that they'd noted within their discussion of the application before they voted?
Sure. So we had a pretty thorough discussion over a committee meeting last month, and then the full board hearing on Tuesday. The committee, and admittedly I haven't seen it. It's not available on Zap yet. But the committee vote was 4-0 to disapprove the application with the condition that 50% of the units be made affordable at 50% AMI. The vote on Tuesday was to adopt that committee's resolution. So the official recommendation, obviously we'll see it when it comes out. But what was articulated at the board meeting on Tuesday was that the only condition was related to the levels of affordability. There's certainly discussion about a range of other questions, benefits, concerns, as expected. And there's the community board is working with a land use consultant who also, raised questions about the racial equity report, the use of the green fast track program. But, with respect to the official recommendation, we anticipate that, it simply relates to the affordability.
Can I just add something for Vicky, if I could?
Sure.
Good morning, Vicky, and
Good morning.
our president's office. So our manager, our company's Apex, we were approved at the same community board on that 7801 Queens Boulevard, the big site with Councilmember Krishnan that was sort of complicated, and we made some interesting compromises with him there. Same community board, just for my own 2 cents, this was a very different experience. I think, although they voted no on this one, we did get 9 yes votes. And the first person who jumped up to make a motion voted yes and said, I would vote to approve this as is. And 9 folks in the room said, yeah, we need housing. We thought they might be concerned with height, not one word about height. And so I was there with Frank, and we had a really spirited discussion about there's no subsidy in these projects. It's not an HPD project. It's a privately financed project. We can't get a construction loan to build the building with more than MIH. That's why that was kind of what was struck. And there was a good deal of dialogue about that. So just for my own 2 cents and for whatever that context is worth, it was a very positive conversation. It was not nasty at all. And there were lots of folks who were there. And Frank, tell me if you disagree, but I just, the context to me was important. It was, I think at that TD Bank 7801, maybe we got 2 yes votes. I think part of the reason there was some better momentum here is that this community board knew, and we talked about the TD Bank 7801 rezoning, and they know, and I reminded them, you voted no. We still made the project better as we worked through ULURP, and I think they all really appreciated that. Frank, I forwarded it to you. One of the gentlemen from the community board, who's among the most vocal, his name is Red, wrote me an email after, and I don't think he'd be, have an issue with me even saying this, saying like, we voted no, but I thank you for coming and explaining, and we do enjoy attempting to work together on these projects. So just a little bit of background for whatever it's worth for your office to hear.
Sure, thank you. Yes, I remember 7801 Queens Boulevard pretty clearly. And actually, it's a good segue to another point of possible compromise. I know that there are studios, 1 beds and 2 beds here, but part of the affordability issue with folks living in New York City is, making sure we have right-sized family units. And so I wanted to ask, is there any possibility of including 3-bedroom units within this project?
Sure. So we actually, there's no studios. It's just 1s and 2s.
Okay.
There's, these plans are illustrative at this point. We think that we've got a good mix today, but are certainly open to suggestion if we can make it work. That's something that we're open to, and we anticipate having to make certain changes as this as we continue to work with the community board, work with your office, and then eventually with the council member to refine the project. So to answer your question, what we're showing is illustrative. It's possible. Obviously it just has to work in terms of the project financials and the overlay of MIH here. So the MIH portion is subject to HPD approval.
Understood. Okay, just wanted to flag that. Um, and I know that this is in the application's project description, but for the record, Frank, when was the last rezoning of this proposed development site? Because I noticed it's an R6B, but when was that zoning district established
Yeah,
last?
so the site was R6 in 1961, and then much later in 1989, as part of the Corona Elmhurst rezoning, it was changed to R6B, along
Okay.
with I think 108th Street. Several blocks were um, essentially this whole area that's in was on my inset was R6, and then several R5 zoning districts were established, R6B on most of the corridors, and then there's even some R7A and R7B districts in other portions, sort of more in Elmhurst area.
Got it. Okay, understood. So two more questions. Can you talk a little bit more about the community facility space that you have included with the project?
Sure. So the community facility space is, and to be candid, it's still like a work in progress. This is something that we have. Pardon me. Yeah, we've got about 17,000 square feet of community facility space. We were intending it to be essentially a community soccer center with a nonprofit partner. So the building is designed to include the soccer facility with a field and locker rooms, and then potentially some additional programming space. We're still working on the details to make that happen, and ensure that either that program or a similar community facility program is situated in the building. In addition to that sort of more traditional community space, there's also would be an adult daycare, which is also considered community facility space. And that would be one of the owners of the site operates several adult daycares within Queens and hopes to establish a location at this site.
Okay, and right, I understand that this is still in the early days of the proposed development and pending ULURP approval, but our office and I'm sure the council member's office would love to be in touch about the programming here if the intended space is not does not come to fruition, or if you need guidance in
Yeah,
that.
Absolutely. I
if
think
I
we're
could
about
just
to say
say,
the
Vicky,
same thing.
quickly, and I appreciate, Frank, that you're just being mindful of saying too much. But so I think at this point we work and have a nice working relationship with the group Common Point. So they've been I don't think you just said that, Frank, but happy to tell Vicky that. That's the conversation to date. When Frank talked about soccer, we were thinking of something contextually appropriate for the neighborhood, and there is this obvious soccer theme for the youth and all ages. Common Point has expressed to me, and I know your office has a close working relationship with them as well. Common Point has expressed, is that the best use? Are there other uses or needs for, what their programming could look like, what their funding could look like? So that's definitely a conversation I think we and they would welcome to have with your office when we get a little bit further.
Okay, great. Thank you for that insight. And then the last question I have is I pretty much asked this of all our applications. Just if you could highlight, any sustainable or energy efficient aspects that exceed what's legally mandated.
Sure. And so I know you're very familiar with the pretty stringent legally mandated requirements here. In addition to being in an electric building, I think, which is significant factor, required factor. I think that the goal here is to really incorporate sustainable features onto this roof. It's potentially and again, understanding that this is a requirement, a great candidate for potentially solar, but definitely some sort of green roof. I think, in addition to mandated requirements, one of the things that we've looked into for this and other projects is adding electric vehicle charging infrastructure into the cellar parking garage, and then looking into the feasibility of rain gardens for the required street tree plantings.
Okay. Thank you, Frank. So I think we can go to public testimony. Sola, can you let me know if anyone is in the attendee list?
There are no speakers.
Okay. No speakers and no one is present in the conference room, so I think we are safe to go ahead and close this item as well. So thank you, team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next scheduled hybrid land use public hearing is Thursday, April 30th, starting at 9:30 a.m. I want to thank everyone for joining us and enjoy the weather today.